So I'm going to keep this quite brief. But I wanted to start out where you contested the nomination in 2020, and I'm wondering what propels your decision to challenge an incumbent president from your own party at this juncture, and what ways do you believe you'd be a better leader than President Biden?
You know, this thing has been made of the fact that he's an incumbent president. There's nothing in the Constitution that goes there. This is a modern thought form. He's the incumbent president of your own party. This is like, show me in the Constitution where it says anything about that. George Washington, in fact, warned us of political parties. He said in his farewell address that it would form factions of men more loyal to their party than to their country. Yes, I'm a Democrat. I'm a Roosevelt Democrat. But my loyalty is not to my party. My loyalty is to my country. John Adams saw political parties as the worst threat to democracy. And the way those guys are behaving today, there's something to think about there. So this idea of challenging the incumbent, they say that, and we all inherit it. They say that as, oh, you can't do that. Why? What is this? Why are we talking about this? Even when they say, oh, Teddy Kennedy, he challenged Carter, and then Carter lost. Carter lost to Ronald Reagan. He didn't lose to Teddy Kennedy. So I just don't buy into that. And I'll tell you something else about what you just asked. That is the horse race. That is the horse race. The horse race is not what matters here. That's what I mean about our being trained to think a certain way. It's not about the horse race. It's about the highest level of poverty of any advanced democracy. It's about the fact that the majority of Americans live with economic anxiety and despair. It's about things that are much bigger than that. I reject, he's an incumbent president. He's a nice man. This is not personal. But that's exactly the level of conversation that should not slow us down.
And then I heard you mention about economic issues, and I know you asserted that our economic system currently falls short of our democratic ideals. So can you outline the adjustments you propose, especially your 21st century economic Bill of Rights, and what that would look like?
One of the things I already talked about here today is that the promises of democracy, as Franklin Roosevelt would call them, are afforded to the citizens of every other advanced democracy. Primary among them, universal health care, Medicare for all. The fact that we don't have it is not because of it's complicated. We have it because it's corrupt. It's the institutionalized greed of the insurance companies. Just like the carcinogens in your food are because of the institutionalized greed of the food companies. And the rationing of insulin is because of the institutionalized greed of the pharmaceutical companies. The climate crisis, in large part, because of the institutionalized greed of the big oil and the institutionalized greed of the defense contracting industry, which has dominated so much of our foreign affairs. So my economic plan is an economic U-turn in this country, because everything that I talked about has been at the expense. That's the problem. Stockholder capitalism, I'm not an anti-capitalist at all, actually. I believe in the hybrid economies that you see in many places in Europe, but there should be a concern for the common good in this country. The basic philosophical principle is supposed to be that government brokers a balance between individual liberty, which includes financial, economic liberty, and a concern for the common good. So I want to balance this. The common good has been sacrificed so that a very few Americans can make money. Making money is a good thing. My concern is that too many Americans never got a shot at it. And no conscious person wants to feel that they're creating wealth at the expense of other people getting a chance to. So I want the basics. I want universal health care. I want to cancel the college loan debt because those loans should never have occurred. I want to see tuition-free college and tech school, which, as I mentioned, we had before the 1970s. I want free childcare. I want paid family leave. I want guaranteed sick pay. And I want a guaranteed living wage. I also want a Department of Peace. I want a Department of Children and Youth. And I want to end America's war on drugs.
Wow. And I know you just mentioned about tuition-free college and tech schools, and I think it's especially prevalent on a college campus. And I'm wondering—
That would not apply to Dartmouth.
So yeah, so this is going to be my question. What would that look like in your opinion, and like how would you finance that?
Well, there are different ways to do this, and on all of these issues, whether you're talking about colleges, whether you're talking about healthcare, there's so much to be gained from looking at what other countries do and how they do it. Even on healthcare, it was a little bit of how Germany does it, a little bit of how England does it, and so forth. When it comes to college, I think Australia has a very compelling system. This is what they say. You pay, you go at the state colleges and universities that are part of the program, you go to the highest level of educational achievement that your own work takes you, okay? When you get out of college, the government has a record of how much money you're making. And when you are making a level of money where your standard of living is considered good enough, it starts paying itself back a little bit every year. Simple enough. As you make more money, and you start paying it back to the government. Some people never will, but the vast majority of people will, and it's a win-win for everyone. Our economy will be so much greater. Our economy will be so much larger when more people are educated, because the more educated you are, the more you can self-actualize, the more you can create your own business, your own products, be the entrepreneur that system says is so wonderful, and they're right. But when you have, I tell you something, I don't know what the situation is here with college loan debt, but I can't even imagine being in my 20s with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. I can't even imagine it. Debt is crippling. Debt is crippling. But to have that kind of debt, as millions of Americans do in their 20s, once again, then you wonder where this mental health crisis comes from. The American dream used to be that you would own a house. The American dream for millions of people right now is to get out of debt before they die.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so many questions I could ask you, but I know that students in the audience have a lot. So for those here in person, I want to start the audience Q&A. Please wait for a microphone to be passed to you so we can broadcast your question to the online audience. And if you are online, feel free to email your questions to rockyq&a@dartmouth.edu. And that could be the word and or the ampersand. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, the boy in blue.
Hi, Marianne. I'm Nacho. My question to you is, why have other Democrats like Bernie Sanders, who stand for many of the ideas that you're running for and who have a similar redirection for the country, backing Joe Biden? And again, I think particularly Bernie, and how do you think that has affected?
I'm a little hard of hearing, so I'm going to come and stand close to you so I can see your mouth.
Yes.
Okay?
So I was asking how many of the Democrats who share many of the ideas that you're running for, why have they supported Joe Biden, and how do you think that has affected your campaign? Who, many of these people share the same ideas for a redirection of the country. Why haven't they been able to walk the walk and vouch for you?
Well, obviously I can't speak for them.
Yes.
My sense with Bernie is that, he is an institutionalist, which I respect. He's a U.S. Senator. My sense, and once again, I can't speak for him, but he seems to believe that what's important now, because it's true, if we had passed the Build Back Better bill, I don't think I would be here. And I think his sense seems to be that if we can just get more Democrats in the House, pass the Build Back Better bill, that will do it, and that's our best shot at repair. Obviously, I disagree with the senator, but I revere him greatly. I also don't understand how you're going to push him left by endorsing him so early. I don't understand that. My sense of AOC, and once again, I don't know, but based on the way she expressed herself, I don't think she knows who I am. I don't think there's a lot of, there's a phrase, contempt prior to investigation. And it is very applicable to many people about me. People who have not read my books, who talk about my books. People who do not know my work talk about it. There's been such a purposeful, I must say, mischaracterization. But they seem to think, and I also think there's something else. And this is very relevant to our conversation. There's something about, and this is not personal to Bernie or to AOC or anyone. There's something about being part of that system. They get sucked in. There are many people who are congresspeople, governors, and senators who agree with everything I've said here tonight. Why aren't they here? Why do I have to do this? Honestly, why do I have to wake up every morning to insult and smear and hit pieces and erasure and invisibilization? Do you think this is fun, really? I mean, this part is fun, but this is not in any way the totality of the experience. Where are those people? Well, you know, they're doing what the DNC says. So wait a minute. So if Gavin Newsom or any of them get in over the next few weeks, we're supposed to believe you didn't have the courage to take on the DNC, but we're supposed to believe you have the courage to take on the insurance companies? Or Big Pharma? Or Big Oil? Or Raytheon? Or Northrop Grumman? Or Boeing? There's a system there. Some really good people are part of the system, but to me, your question is a demonstration of how the system operates. It will not disrupt itself. And that's why I said, if it's going to happen, it's going to come from us. And even as a candidate, it's going to come from somebody on the outside. Does that make sense? That's how I see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also happy to repeat the question so the whole audience can hear it. Let's do over here, up in the front. Right.
Hello.
You can stand up.
So how would you improve workers' rights? Would that include the incentivization of worker co-ops? And if so, how would you go about that?
Well, first of all, it's very exciting what's happening now. The first Gilded Age was responded to with the establishment of organized labor, and we're in the middle of a regeneration, revitalization that's truly profound and very exciting. I was on the picket line in Detroit the other day, the UAW. My current hero is Shawn Fain. I think it's just amazing. I want to be the political Shawn Fain. I think it's just amazing to hear him. I have great respect, Kristen Smalls, all of them, whether it's taking on Jeff Bezos, taking on Howard Schultz, taking on the big three. I think it's the only way that we are going to course correct a malevolent strain of capitalism, unfettered capitalism, and the damage that it's done. It's going to take an inside-outside strategy of electoral politics and organized labor. I support the PRO Act. I support a sexual bargaining. I support a beefing up of the NLRB. The president has done some of that. I think Lena Khan is great. But there would be, if I were president right now, I was at Detroit, I was on the picket line, and the president did get there. I certainly would be there as well. And workers' co-ops, something's happening in this country. You know, we are living in two worlds simultaneously. It's almost like there are two attitudinal universes. One world is falling apart, and another world is struggling to be born. And what you were seeing, you know, one of the things for me when I was in Detroit last week on the UAW picket line, and you can see some of this if you go to my social media, I have a couple of videos from my time in Detroit on the picket line, and one is an interview with 3 retired auto workers who are union guys. And it's really wonderful hearing them talk and how excited they are to see young people getting excited about labor. This is really a big deal because when Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics and trickle-down economics, all of that started, part of the strategy was demonizing unions. Now, that's not to say unions didn't have some of their own malfeasance, et cetera, but it was part of the strategy. So I would be, you know, I know President Biden calls himself the most pro-union president, but nothing like me. If you're really pro-worker, you pass Medicare for all. If you're really pro-worker, you fight for that minimum wage. The president ran in part on raising the minimum wage. Well, at that obscene number of $7.25 an hour. And I remind you, by the way, in having this conversation, that in the majority of American cities, a living wage is at least $20 an hour. So the president did make $15 an hour minimum wage for federal workers. But then when it came to putting that $15 an hour into the COVID relief bill, he was stopped by the parliamentarian. parliamentarian has no actual political power. And I assure you that no Republican president allows himself to be stopped by the parliamentarian. When the parliamentarian challenged George Bush, he fired the parliamentarian. So there are a lot of ways in which he used that, as a convenient excuse. So I believe that in being pro-worker, part of that will be, in addition to such things as the PRO-Act, sectoral bargaining, worker co-ops that you mentioned, NLRB, it will also be fighting for Medicare for all, minimum wage, and a guaranteed living wage, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then we have a question actually from online. How would you suggest we control or eliminate guns in America?
How do people what?
How would you suggest we control or eliminate guns in America?
Well, the situation is such that we're living in a moment of possibility. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats, including the majority of gun owners in this country, want common sense gun safety laws. Things have gone so far, even in some red states, that you have some red governors who now say, yes, we should have universal red flag laws, that did not say that 10 or even, I don't even think 5 years ago. Obviously, I would want an assault weapon ban. Everything that we all know to be true, whether it has to do with bump stocks, high-capacity magazines, all of those things, the boyfriend laws, the risk, the time between purchase of a gun and able to actually procure it, and so forth. We know what needs to happen. But I have to say something. The goal should not be the elimination of guns. We have to respect, and I think that if you want to get right-wingers bristling, you use language like that. There is a Second Amendment. You start messing with the Second Amendment, they're going to try to mess with the First. So let's be very careful here. It should not be, we should not see that as our goal, the fact that the founders said that, the citizens have the right to bear arms, but you have a right to drive too. There's still traffic laws. And you still have to take a test, and you have to pass that and get a license. And that should be much stricter. But I don't believe that I'm very different on guns than any other Democratic president who have tried, and some of them have tried very hard. And during the midterms in the Clinton administration, it was very sad. Some very, very fine people lost their jobs because they stood up for the assault weapon ban. One of the powers of the presidency that I would use, hopefully to great effect, but I would certainly use it passionately, is the bully pulpit. And I believe that this is an area where, as president, I would seek very hard, not only to make these external changes, but to have a conversation with the American people, which enabled us to harness that majority of Republicans, Democrats, and gun owners, so that more people would be in Congress. Listen, no matter who you are, no matter who the president is, you are hoping for a House and Senate that will align with you on the agenda items that matter most to you, and guns would be one. But sometimes a politician will say to you, I want to go to Washington and fight for you. I don't want to go to Washington and fight for you. That's not my idea of a good time. But I want to go to Washington and co-create with you a better America. And in order to do that, this has to be something we do together. The forces that would mitigate against our having safer streets are in Concord as much as in Washington. They're in Sacramento, they're in Austin. In order for this country to genuinely, fundamentally transform, all of us need to begin to see politics and political activism as simply a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life. No more thinking, well, I'm doing enough if I vote every 2 years. Or certainly not if you think it's enough to just vote every 4 years, because corporate lobbyists, including the NRA, are in the offices of these people every hour of every day. So I would do my best, but you're going to have to elect a whole different breed of Congress and Senator and Congressperson and Senator to get that one done.
Let's continue. Over right next to you, Cooper. Yes, right there. You can take the mic, please.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. I'm obviously a little older than most of the audience here. I came up through Vietnam and civil rights movements and all of those eras. And I've heard a lot of candidates and a lot of presidents, sitting presidents as well, make some wonderful promises and plans and goals, to have them shot down and blocked by obstructionists in the Congress, the legislative that holds the purse strings, obviously. And we've seen it in the theater just this last week, was ridiculous in the way they play this, where a small group of only 10 obstructionists can hold the country hostage. How would you, as president, deal with this type of obstructionism and this type of blockage to the great ideal goals that you have?
We all took 8th grade civics, hopefully. We have 3 co-equal branches of government. The president does not have a magic wand. And you actually don't want the president to have a magic wand. And like I was saying before, no matter who the president is, there was a time towards the end of his presidency, which of course turned out to be towards the end of his life, where Franklin Roosevelt talked to Wendell Willkie about forming another political party. He was so frustrated by the racist Southern senators that were holding him back. That's just part of the way the game is played, but that goes back to what I said before. That has to be something we do together. And that has to do with the fact that all of us are responsible for the kinds of congresspeople and senators you have. And for those of you who are Democrats, you've got to get involved on the primary level, no matter who you are, Democrat, Republican, or whatever. You can't just wait for election day. That's why I'm talking to you today. The primaries are urgently important. And there are corporatist elements who not only suppress someone like myself, candidacy of someone like myself, invisibilize, erase, blackball, all of that. They do the same thing on the congressional level. They do the same thing on the senatorial level. So all of us have to get in there. So it's not just how would I deal with it, it's also how would you deal with it. Obama had the House and the Senate and the White House. We had it for 2 years. Obama and he had that for 2 years, and Biden had it for 2 years. So I think for the Democratic Party, it's not just what are you going to do with obstructionists with the Democrats? What are you going to do with the power when they give it to you, guys? Because with the Republicans, modern Republican presidents abuse the power of the presidency. Modern Democratic presidents will come up with excuses like, well, we didn't get a mandate, so we're going to wait until the next term. To the Republicans, we won the election, that's our mandate, and they're right. So one of the things you would see me do is I would not pussyfoot around with the powers of the presidency. I would not abuse, I would not overreach, but neither would I be this kind of milquetoast person with all this performative stuff to make you think I understand what you're saying, and I would do things like invest in green energy over here, but actually give more oil drilling permits over there. Or even like Obama, who would say certain things, and with Obama, there were things which if a Republican president would do it, we would scream bloody murder. If Obama did it, we'd go, oh, poor baby, they wouldn't let him, when there was no evidence he had tried. And that's what the modern corporatist Democrats do. Their playbook is to tell you what you want to hear. And so you assume they're going to do certain things. So I would use the power of the presidency. I can't override Congress except to a veto, of course. And you use executive orders where you feel it's necessary. And you also use the bully pulpit. I would lay it down and be as real with you as president as I am as a candidate. And then many of those things, my conversation would be such that I didn't get it done this time. I didn't get it done in my 4 years. But by having this conversation with you, I hope you are preparing yourselves to be more effective at taking the baton from me after those 4 years. I would not be able in my term to turn the ship around, but I do believe with all my heart I could get us around the curve and then hand it over to you. Does that make sense?
Okay, we only have time for one more question.
Would that be this lady here?
Sure.
Hello, thank you so much for the talk. You mentioned the Department of Peace.
Yes.
And maybe the biggest threat to the world's peace right now is Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, 2014, Georgia in 2028. So And in one of your interviews, you mentioned that the war in Ukraine will end with negotiations. What for you are acceptable terms of ending Russia's invasion, and do you support continued US aid to Ukraine?
I'm not sure I heard everything you said, but you asked about a Department of Peace and you asked about Ukraine. Yes. A Department of Peace building is a real thing. It's a specific set of skills. There are 4 factors which statistically mean that when they are present, there will be a higher incidence of peace and there will be a lower incidence of violence. And this is true whether it's a corner of an American city or another corner of the world. Those 4 factors are the following: greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, reduction of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. That is how you strategize peace. Martin Luther King said there's negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace is where there's no outright violence, but there's an underlying tension and anxiety. He said positive peace can only be predicated on brotherhood and justice. So a Department of Peace is about strategizing a world at peace. We need to imagine a world 100 years from now in which there is no war and reverse engineer. Just like we play war games, we need to play peace games. And so the issue here is that while some people would say that someone like myself is naive to think that we could even do that, I say what's naive is to think the species will even survive another 100 years if we don't at least try. Just like we have a military academy, we can have a peace academy. A military academy is where people are trained to wage war most effectively, should we feel that that is necessary. And then that education, they pay that education back by being available to do so should their country need them. The Peace Academy would be the same. You pay us back for that education by being part of this. It's almost like the Peace Corps 2.0. The Peace Corps is, we're going to send you somewhere, do what you can. But the strategizing of peace and a Department of Peace would be about strategically working to undercut the conditions, the root causes of violence, so that violence does not even erupt. Now, about Ukraine. There is a US war machine, and it's a snake, and we have to cut the head of it off. There is a blob. There is a way in which the Pentagon is merely the piggy bank of Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Raytheon. It is absolutely absurd, and it would never happen in my administration, that our current Secretary of Defense is a former board member at Raytheon. It is ridiculous, the price gouging of the Pentagon, well established by 60 Minutes, which apparently does a much better oversight than the US Congress does. One of the first things I would do is have another audit of another one of every penny of the Pentagon, and I'm sure they would fail. I am very hip to this. I want at least a 10%, hopefully beginning at a 20% reduction in the US defense budget. Added to that, I understand we poked the bear. I understand that we were irresponsible about NATO. I understand that those Aegis missiles in Poland should never have been there. Having said all that, none of that to me justifies the atrocious behavior of Vladimir Putin. To me, the military is like a surgeon. If America needs surgery, you better believe we need the best surgeon. And should we have the best surgeon on hand, you better believe, and we do need that. But a reasonable person tries to avoid surgery. At the same time, there are times where surgery is deemed necessary. And I do not, we were talking about this earlier. I think a lot of this comes to a gut call. A lot of this comes down to a gut call, what you think of Vladimir Putin. Some people say the United States should withdraw all military support. We should call for a ceasefire. First of all, should we support a negotiated settlement? Of course we should, and passionately. It is the only answer. There was a meeting in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago. This is a multipolar world now. It's not unipolar. The United States does not call every shot. So you have to have the United States, China, Brazil, India. They were all there. But I support a negotiated settlement in which there is still a Ukraine to negotiate. So I actually resent it when I'm called the war candidate, and a couple of my opponents are called the peace candidate. Because when you were talking about just the immediate withdrawal of all US military support, I assure you, what we would then see would be anything but peaceful. Vladimir Putin would love it. And if anybody in this room thinks he'd be fine, cool guys, let's all stop now. You stop, we'll stop. I think it's absurdly naive to think that that's what Vladimir Putin would do. If we were to, at this point, withdraw all support, he would simply crush Ukraine. Now, some people say, Marianne, you're wrong. This is all he wants. We've heard that one before. And there was Crimea, then he takes a beat, then he comes for more. Yeah, he might take a beat. But if you talk to people in Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania and Finland and Sweden, even on the left, they don't see him the way many Americans do, who in my mind are apologists for Putin in a really bizarre way. If you were an anti-imperialist, and I am an anti-imperialist, we should all be an anti-imperialist. It's like anti-thievery. But I call out my country when I feel it's an imperialist venture, such as Iraq, such as the last 20 years in Afghanistan. But I equally call out Vladimir Putin. And I supporting Ukraine in the ability to negotiate at a time and in a way where Ukraine as a sovereign nation has a chance to exist. Ukrainians would not be fighting the way they're fighting if they were nothing but tools for the US State Department. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, with this final minute, I would like to give you an invitation if you have any final remarks.
Thank
you'd
you.
like to share.
Well, I would just say, number one, that I'm grateful. And I know it sounds a little romantic, but I'm very aware how fortunate we are. I'm very aware that there are countries where if I, particularly as a woman, made even a fraction of the criticisms of my government that I have made here today, that I would be hauled off, possibly tortured, even killed. So I think it's kind of like when you go to therapy and you have to look at some of the things you've done wrong, but it's important that the therapist's there to remind you you didn't do everything wrong. And when you're talking about all the great things you've done, that the therapist is there to remind you, you didn't do everything right. And I think we have to hold America that way at this time. We have to remember that we haven't done anything wrong. And that despite even the things we have to look at now and identify as real problem solvers, even in problems in our past even, let's identify with the problem solvers. So I'm very aware of being in an early primary state. I think it's exciting being here. I have talked at many colleges and universities, and for all the reasons that I've already spoken, I'm really happy to be with younger people who weren't even of the 20th century and are so ready because that's the age we're at. Could we just start over, please? I'm with you. Could we just start over, please? Let's have a new beginning. Let's have a season of repair. And I feel that as president, I can help get this started. And I'm grateful to be in New Hampshire because New Hampshire, regardless of what the DNC is doing with their shenanigans, they cannot strip New Hampshire of its significance. They could strip me of delegates, but they can't strip you of your significance. So if you believe that there is a reason for this campaign to exist, you don't have to decide today. You don't have to decide till January who you're going to vote for. But I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I appreciate those of you here at Dartmouth in your official capacity. Thank you for inviting me. It's a long job interview. That's what a political race is, and you're interviewing candidates, and this is how it should be. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you what I would do with the powers of the job if you put them in my hands. If you do feel moved and you do want this campaign to exist, I assure you that the institutional resistance is greater than you even know, and I'd appreciate your help. I'd appreciate you going to Marianne2024.com, signing up. I appreciate your telling your friends. I appreciate your following on social media, create buzz. If you have time and bandwidth, help us call bank, volunteer, do canvassing with us. Something incredible can happen here. And I think the country is ready. There's a critical mass of Americans who know something's wrong. We have to do something different. And now it's a matter of being ready to actually do that. If you think I have a part to play, please help me. Thank you very much.
And again, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.